library board is held without physical presence of a quorum of the library trustees. And it is specifically authorized by the governor pursuant to COVID-19 Executive Order Number 5, dated March 16th, 2020. The minutes of this meeting will include that foregoing statement. The second is a public notice. Due to current public health concerns and extension of the governor's stay-at-home mandate by Executive Order 2020-33, this meeting is being conducted electronically. Anyone wishing to observe and/or comment must email the library board at Fox River Valley Public Library District.info no later than 12 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, and will receive online access to the meeting. If you do not have electronic access and would like to make a public statement, you can call the library at 847-428-3661 before 5 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, and leave a message indicating that you would like your message to be read into the record during the public comment section of the meeting. A recording of this meeting will be available on the library's website by Friday, May 29th. Okay, having said that, I'd like to call to order the Fox River Valley Public Library District Board of Trustees meeting, May 19th, 2020 at 7:13 p.m. May we have the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Can you see it?
No, don't see it yet. Wait a couple more seconds and we'll just do without that.
Funny, I'm
Well, why don't we just all stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance.
okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Dave.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
Brian.
Here.
Nikki is present. Christine. Here. Richard.
Here. Okay, public comment. The board recognizes its responsibility to provide an opportunity for anyone wishing to comment at any meeting to do so. Due to the current public health concerns, the May 19th, 2020 meeting will be conducted electronically. Any person wishing viewing the meeting online and/or wishing to comment will be accommodated in accordance with the public notice I read a few moments ago. Citizens will not be required to sign in to comment. Speaking time is limited to 5 minutes, and the board will not engage in a two-way dialogue. Do we have anyone who's viewing this meeting that would like to make a public comment? I hear none. Do we have any phone-in? Anyone on the phone that would like to make a comment?
We've received no phone messages to be read into the record.
Okay, so we have nothing that had come into us, nothing by email or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay, we'll move on to the president's report. The only thing I have in the way of correspondence, you saw the staff comments that were sent in relationship to our board action last month. I think those are very nice and thank them for their kind words. Again, in order to keep the meeting to a minimum time in accordance with the governor's directive, we'll dispense with any department reports or trustee reports unless someone has something they'd like to bring into the record. Any trustee have any report? Okay. Let's move right on then to the director's report.
Okay, we'd like to start with the summer reading update. We want to make sure that the trustees are aware that just because the physical libraries are closed, we have a robust virtual summer reading program that we're planning. And our youth services manager, Monica Boyer, and our Randall Oaks manager, Brittany Berger, are spearheading that effort. And I'd like to have them fill you in now.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So the Summer Reading Challenge Committee has been hard at work these past few weeks since it became necessary to move the challenge completely online this year. We chose to purchase a subscription to an online platform called Beanstack because of its great customizable features and its very streamlined and user-friendly interface that it offers. We really looked for the best way to keep our patrons engaged virtually as much as possible while they're unable to visit the library this summer, and Beanstack really delivered on that. So thanks in large part to the hard work of our IT specialist, Erin, we have been able to keep our Summer Reading Challenge kickoff set for Monday, June 1st. So with all of these changes we've had to make this summer, we're really pleased to give our patrons like a sense of consistency with the timeline. So the challenge will run from June 1st for the usual 8 weeks, all the way until July 26th. Now, in lieu of having a kickoff picnic this year, our scheduled children's music performer, Jim Gill, will be recording a special video concert just for us that we will be able to post on our YouTube channel for the first 3 days of June. And our theme this year is called Dig Deeper. And with that, we just really hope to inspire our patrons to read, investigate, and discover all summer long, even if they're doing it from home and not from the library. And now I'm just going to turn it over real quick to Monica, who will explain a little bit more of the patron experience.
Thanks, Brittany. So for patrons to finish, adult and teen patrons to finish the program, they're going to read 20 hours total. And then for our youth group, they'll have to read 14 hours to complete the challenge. So Beanstack has this really cool feature where it gives these digital badges out. And so that's how children and their families are going to be able to keep track of everything that they have completed, like minute-wise. And at the end of the program, we hope to gift all our patrons a book of their choice, like we have been able to the last few years. That's still a little bit in the works, but that's what's going on with our summer reading challenge. Our whole committee has really put in a lot of work the last 3 weeks to make this happen. So yay to the committee.
Thank you, Monica, Brittany. I'm glad for that update. Does anyone on the board have any questions about the summer reading program?
I just appreciate that you came up with an option for doing this, and how the detailed reports in the director's report and the committee reports or the team reports were really helpful. So thank you.
The kickoff picnic is will start on the first, and the guy performing is Jim Gill, who I have great fondness for. I think, Dave, I steered you toward one of his concerts at the Crystal Lake Library last year. And he's very fun. So I'm delighted that we're going to have him as part of our library.
I would just like to add on to what Nikki said. Last year was my first time I ever went to the kickoff picnic. And, you know, seeing how engaged our patrons are, I was so sad thinking everything was going to just end. And I'm thrilled with having read everything and with your presentation. I know that this is not going to be easy for all of you, but I am so glad our patrons are going to have this so that kids will be engaged in reading during the summer. Thank you.
Yeah, I took my grandkids to see Jim Gill's performance in Crystal Lake, and they were very much engaged. They had a great time. Yeah, so I'm sure it'll go well. Good choice.
Okay. Next up, want to give you a quick update on summer lunches, and Heather Zabsky is spearheading this effort for us.
Hello. This year will mark our 4th year participating in the Summer Food Service Program, serving free meals to children under the age of 18. The meals are provided freely to the library from the Northern Illinois Food Bank, and then the food bank is then reimbursed for each meal served to a child by the USDA. This year we'll be expanding the program to include breakfast as well as lunches. We will be serving both meals from noon to 1, the same schedule as past years, and we'll be starting on June 1st. We currently have 7 managers trained as site supervisors who are oversee distributing the meals. We are expecting high demand this year because of the increase in unemployment and less sites participating because they are closed. Due to precautions from COVID-19 outbreak, meals will be served for curbside pickup only. We'll also not be using volunteers this year to limit exposure and reduce the number of people in the library building. We're very happy to be able to continue to provide this needed service to the children in the library district, especially now when it's going to be needed more than ever.
No question. It's a wonderful service, and I'm really pleased and proud of our library for taking on and continuing to take on that project.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Heather. Happy to
Heather, I
continue.
just have to say congratulations on your nomination to the Caldecott Committee. That's great.
Yeah, very good.
Very
When-
good.
When was it start? When were the meals gonna start? June?
June 1st.
Okay, thank you. But yes, that was awesome, the Caldecott.
Yeah, that's a biggie. I mean, man, yeah, that adds a lot of cachet to our library. So we are so delighted for Monica. That's yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to say thanks.
And we're jealous she gets to read all the books and evaluate. That's,
Pass those around? Like, how do we, get in on that?
I actually can't, like literally, I can't talk about it. There's a whole clause to it. But yeah, I'm very excited. Thank you.
next up, I was hoping that Carrie, our account services manager, Carrie Carroll, can briefly talk to us about delivery requests so far.
Thank you, Lauren. Since the initial email last week, last Tuesday, announcing that we were considering deliveries, we have had 162 delivery requests. A couple of those even from non-FRV PLD card holders, so it's clear that lots of folks were really excited about this possibility. Sadly, at this time, they will not get to partake. It will just be for our card holders. We have over 1,200 holds currently on the hold shelf. And for those of you who are familiar with the Dundee hold area, you may remember that there were spaces at the top and the bottom. It was never quite full. It is completely full. There are 3 additional carts just snaking away from the shelves just to accommodate all of the holds that have been placed since last Tuesday. Account Services Clerk Audrey Joswiak and Youth Services Library Assistant Andrea Rico have been working at the library since last Monday, pulling all of these holds. And I would gather to say that they've pulled over 600 holds since the delivery email was sent on Tuesday. So humongous shout out to them and their efforts. They have put in a good solid week's plus worth of work. And even after the email was sent, I received immediate emails asking, what do I need to do to get a library card? How can I get in on this? We've regularly received emails from patrons who have signed up who have requested the delivery, asking, is it happening? Is it coming? And I'm letting them know that it will be decided tonight, but there is definitely enthusiasm for this idea. Been very well received.
Harry, can I ask, you said there's 1,200 holds on the hold shelf.
Yes.
100 of them were from prior to the email, and then about 162 delivery requests and about 600 pieces have been pulled for that. Am I understanding that correctly?
I feel like I'm kind of lowballing the requests that have been put in since the delivery. For how I'm seeing it is CCS shut down all holds that would be fulfilled at other libraries and limited it just to our materials for our patrons. And when they did that, it was about like 150 or so. As soon as that delivery email hit, it rocketed up above 500 and then stayed above 500 for the first few days that Audrey and Andrea were still pulling holds. So I feel like it was even more than 600. It's just,
wow,
without a doubt, it doubled the amount of holds that were on the shelf. No question.
Wow.
So, depending on our board action tonight, does that mean that we'll initiate deliveries as well as curbside pickup? Has that been decided?
No, the consideration right now, since we're still in phase 2, is for delivery, which requires very few library staff working simultaneously. And when Illinois moves to phase, or our area of Illinois moves to phase 3, then we're working on curbside.
Okay. So all these holds will be handled through delivery?
Yes.
Wow. That's great. Pretty ambitious.
We've got it all planned out. The Safe Reopening Task Force has really thought of everything, and we've worked with other libraries and their plans, and honestly, staff is incredible. They've really just jumped in. When given the choice about coming back to work, oh my gosh, people are fighting with one another to come back. Nobody wants to be sitting at home. Everyone wants to come back to work, and so yeah, we're eager to get rolling.
Okay, good.
Lauren, a follow-up question on do we have all the PPE necessary? Your report indicated in the process of receiving.
That's correct.
Hopefully it's in now.
Yep, we have gloves and we have masks. We have hand sanitizer. When you walk in either the east or west door at Dundee, you're immediately greeted with everything you need to clean your hands, cover your hands, cover your face. And right now we're following the protocol of OSHA's requirement is you have to wear a mask if you cannot maintain 6 feet of social distancing. And with the few staff members we have, we can maintain that distancing. So if you're in one space, you don't need to wear a mask. But if you're moving from one area of the building to another, you're wearing the mask. We have the surgical masks, not the homemade, not the N95. We're not taking those from healthcare workers, but just the basic face covering. we have plenty of those for staff to be able to work as they need to.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. We appreciate that update. And next up is budget presentation. Are you seeing the presentation?
No, not yet.
We are seeing your Windows Explorer.
Yeah, last month when we did this, it went off without a hitch, and now it's just one hitch out there now.
Hey, I know what you're saying.
Right.
I've
If
done things with you guys.
when you
I
do
had no problems until tonight. So
when you do share, can you pick the PDF after you opened it up?
Well, I tried that with the American flag and it didn't pick it up. So I thought maybe if I open it after I'm sharing, you're still not seeing it.
Do you have multiple screens?
For Teams or
For your computer?
I don't think so.
Okay. So if you share your desktop, we should see everything on your desktop.
my assumption is when oh, there we go.
Okay. You're seeing it now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So the 2021 working budget. For the past 5 months, the management team has been assembling the working budget. We've already received notice from Kane County as to the exact amount of property taxes we'll receive this summer and fall, and 47% of property taxes are escrowed, so it's fairly safe to predict tax revenues for the coming year. On the expense side, we do a zero-based budget. We plan what we'll need in the coming year and collect estimates for these items. We predict what we'll want to spend on materials based upon what's circulating now and anticipate staffing needs in conjunction with the salary survey already approved by the board. We've received our IMRF rate, and it includes a decreased anticipated employer rate of 10.81%, which we're very happy about. The employer rate increased last year due to IMRF changing the anticipated rate of return from 7.5 to 7.25. So for us to go down to 10.81 was good. So all that is anticipated in this budget. So we've put all these figures together to come up with an estimate of the allocation of funds for next year. You will not be voting on this draft working budget tonight. It's presented for discussion and input, and we will incorporate it into a working budget, which will be subject to board vote at the June board meeting. This slide is to give you an idea of the financial schedule coming for the rest of the year. So in January through April, we don't have a whole lot of financial decisions to determine, but as you can see, starting in May and through the rest of 2020, most board meetings, actually all board meetings, have a financial determination that has to be met. So in June, you decide on the final working budget. Then at July, you'll be approving the tentative budget and appropriation, the B&A. The B&A takes the working budget and adds some money to it to come up with a maximum amount that can be spent within our broad categories: personnel, materials, operations, maintenance, utilities or building expenses, and capital expense. The library can go over or under budget within general ledger amounts as long as we stay under the appropriated amount for each category. You can think of the appropriation as a whole second budget, and this is the one that specifies the maximum amount which can be legally expended by the library within a fiscal year if sufficient funds are available. So you'll approve the tentative B&A in July. After which, that'll require the notice of hearing to be posted in the library, letting the public know that the final hearing on the tentative B&A will be held during the September board meeting. Once again in September, you may think you've already approved this, but you'll need to change the budget and appropriation from tentative to final. And the president and the secretary will then certify the B&A ordinance, and this is filed with the county clerk. All those other budgets, the working budget you'll approve in June, the one you'll approve in July, are internal documents and can be changed with board action. Once the B&A is certified, any changes the board makes must be submitted to Kane County as an amended B&A. The library has not amended the B&A as long as I've been here, although we had expected to this year due to license plate sales, but COVID-19 put the kibosh on that, along with everything else. Even after approving the budget, remember our internal procedures set threshold amounts that staff members can authorize. Managers can order up to $500. Anything over $500 requires assistant director approval, and anything over $2,500 requires director approval. Once we get to $10,000, that requires board approval. So the board decides whether or not to purchase anything above $10,000. It would be coming back to you. So what makes up our 2021 budget? Well, in summary, we're going to have a balanced budget. We're recommending that our revenues equal our expenditures for next year. So on the question of where our revenues come from, this year there's a bit of a change. We see property taxes will make up 87% of total revenues. And the next highest category is miscellaneous, generally charges for services. This is up to 7% for next year because we anticipate the almost $200,000 in revenue for license plate renewals. The other categories that make up revenues are state taxes, the per capita grant, and the personal property replacement tax, PPRT, making up about 3%, and the remaining 3% of revenues through interest. What makes up operating expenditures? For next year, we anticipate 62% through personnel. According to the Illinois Library Association state standards, the library compensates staff in a fair and equitable manner. Salaries alone typically account for up to 60% of the total operation budget. For Fox River Valley Public Library District, our salaries make up 49%. State standards also say salaries plus fringe benefits, FICA, pensions such as IMRF, health insurance, and tuition reimbursement account for up to 70%. And as you can see from this slide, we're at 62% for total personnel. State standards also say a minimum of 12% of the operating budget should be spent on materials for patrons, and we are at 11%. Every year we've struggled with this. We try to spend, we've had a hard time spending more without a physical place to put items. Although with the increase in virtual materials, I am loving the 3 holds ratio to start purchasing. And even when our doors open to the public again, we're going to keep that ratio for ebooks and e-audiobooks so that wait times on those items should be very minimal in the future. The rest of operating expenditures, 19% will go to operating. This also has a big bump because there's almost $200,000 to be spent for license plate renewals. So if we take in about 200, we have to then send those funds to the Secretary of State at about 190,000. So we'll make about $10,000 next year of income on license plate renewals. And the other 8% is building for maintenance and utilities. That also has an increase due to the retirement of our custodian, and that shift then from custodial from custodial salaries to custodial maintenance expenditures. So the questions that the board needs to have answered in making a budget decision: will we be better off or worse off at the end of next fiscal year? So I'm projecting that our total fund balance at the beginning of next fiscal year on July 1st of 2020 should be about $5.5 million. And then the total projected fund balance at the end of the next fiscal year would also be about $5.5 million because we're projected to have a balanced budget. In the past, excuse me, if we ended up running a surplus in the general fund, we would transfer any excess from general to special reserve fund. The balance in our special reserve fund of the $5.5 million we have, our special reserve fund has about $3.3 million right now. We can only use this money for capital projects. We can't spend it on salaries or library materials or general operating expenditures. As we project long-term operating spending with two co-equal facilities and intend to only go for a construction referendum if so decided, we want to have as large of a balance as possible in our operating fund. So rather than transfer those funds at the end of the fiscal year, I propose instead that we build up the operating fund as much as is permissible. Our current fund balance policy permits up to 12 months in the operating fund. At the end of last year, we had 1.6 million combined operating balance. That is the 10 fund, the operating fund, the 20 fund, FICA, the 30 fund, IMRF, and 90, which isn't really a fund, it's the donations fund, but for audit purposes, it's part of the operating fund. So, and that was about 5 months. So at the end of last fiscal year, we had 5 months of operating. If we keep the $500,000 surplus that I anticipate we're going to have from this fiscal year in the operating fund, then we would finish this year with just under 7 months of operating expenditures. So if we end fiscal year 2021 with a surplus, that 7 month surplus of operating expenditures would increase as well. So we could potentially have 8 or even 9 months of operating expenditures by the end of 2021, which is well within our permissible range of up to 12 months. What are the biggest financial threats to the library? A property tax freeze would be a threat to the library. Right now, we are held to the amount of increase by the PTEL, that stands for Property Tax Extension Limitation Law, and that limits the amount of the increase to the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. It's never been close to 5%. The inflation rate for last year was 2.3. So theoretically, we could be levying for a 2.3% increase when we set the next levy. But again, COVID-19 has really thrown a whammy on everything. So, you know, who knows if that will happen or not. The other financial threat to the library is TIFs, tax increment financing. When the villages decide to TIF property, then taxpayers think that taxpayers are still paying all those taxes, but instead it goes to the villages and they get to decide what to do with it for up to 23 years. At this point in this coming fiscal year 2021, we're going to lose $150,000 to TIFs, and combined we've lost $650,000 to TIFs since the year 2000. They're definitely an escalating pace by the villages. Next thing the board needs to know, are we cheating our kids by pushing significant financial obligations onto future generations? And the answer for the library is no. Our capital replacement schedule guarantees that current obligations are funded with today's money. Our pension is through the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which is not a state-run pension. The IMRF is 97% funded on a market basis, and our goal is to be 100% funded, which means having all the money on hand that will be needed to pay for benefits of current and future retirees. And last, OPEB, other post-employment benefits for the library are negligible. We have two former staff members who are currently on the library's health insurance plan, but those employees pay 100% of the health insurance. The library pays 0 towards retiree health benefits. Are we maintaining our infrastructure? Yes. Of the 3.3 million in the special reserve fund, 1.3 million is earmarked for infrastructure repair and replacements. And also, if we were to remodel the Dundee Library, that would be accomplished using construction bonds in conjunction with a remodeled West Side location. And so we would certainly have ample funds in either case were we to do a Dundee remodel or having to fix up anything that was in need of repair. Are there any questions about the working budget for next year?
Lauren, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned that the personnel portion of the budget amounted to 62% this year. What was it last year?
It was, I think, it was definitely a little higher. We used to have, there were units that were charged to personnel that didn't need to be. We were paying our workers' comp, we were paying our unemployment insurance, we were paying training. There were a lot of things that were neither salary nor benefits that were included in the personnel line. So those moved to operating.
So the net effect, it's the 62% is about what it was last year, the real personnel portion?
In comparing those,
Yeah.
well, salaries were asking for a 0% increase. There's a slight health insurance. So here, okay. So 62% is definitely lower, but the total amount is very similar. And the reason why it's lower is because the license plate renewals add $200,000 of operating expenditures to our bucket. So it's 62, personnel this year is 62% of a higher number than it was last year.
Okay.
So it's very similar. In personnel, we've asked for very little difference. Of
Yeah.
the 5 components,
That's what I thought.
yeah.
That's what I thought.
Anything else?
And we will have a formal discussion of the budget shortly.
Okay.
No one else a question or on at this point? Okay, let's move on.
Next in the director's report, I have a note on department head reports. And really these 3 things, the department head reports, the performance goals dashboard, which is my metrics specifically, and the regular dashboard. So they've all been presented in the board packet. Does anyone have any questions or would like to discuss any of those documents individually?
I have a question on the director's report, Mike Tennis.
Okay.
On the, not director's report, but the department reports, the Zoom Pro. What was the cost to purchase Zoom Pro? Would you happen to know?
I don't remember. I'm hoping John does. It's not long ago that we.
Yeah. So Zoom Pro, we got it at 50% of whatever the cost is, and it came out, I believe, around $80.
Wow, $80. You know how much District 300 paid for Zoom Pro? $40,000.
Well, okay.
Yep.
We only bought one license, so we can only have really one meeting going on at once.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
Their 40,000 was to accommodate, I think it was around 2,100, providing meeting rooms, etc. That's why I raised the question. I was hoping it was nowhere near that kind of a number.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a question then about the Zoom. Would patrons sign up to use it since only there can be one meeting at a time? You would just reserve it?
So the Zoom meeting Zoom's going to be used by our programming people, mainly youth services and adults and teen services. And they will, inside the programming event, there will be a link that they'll provide for Zoom. It will have the meeting ID and the password, and basically all they have to do is click on that link and they will be into that program. So I don't necessarily have to sign up. I don't think that's the way they're doing it, but they could as well.
Okay.
And Jason can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay. If there's nothing else, then I'm done with the director's report.
I had a couple of comments real quick. I was waiting to see if Jason was chiming in. I love that the post about the Wi-Fi was massively, I know I shared it. I saw multiple other people that I'm friends with share it. So I thought that was fantastic.
You know, we posted that twice. We had posted it the first time and it got no traction. And Kirsten created that awesome graphic with it. So it looks like the Wi-Fi is gravitating out of the building. And then people went nuts for it. And thank you, Christina, for bringing that to our attention.
Yeah, yeah, Christina brought that up and then it just got tremendous traction. And I think that did. And then Harry Hawaziak, sorry, okay, with the masks. Oh my gosh. And then also I love the overdrive checkouts. I actually put in a request. I've never put in a request for a book before. And it was A Woman of No Importance, which just showed up on Facebook because Kirsten had asked for what is Trustees reading. And I sent in holding my Kindle book, but I was so excited to actually get that book. And then it worked out perfect because but it was great. It was actually pretty impressively fast on my request went in. I got an email response back right away. And then another one that said, I'm going to look into it from, I think, Basically. And then later I got the email that it was ordered, waited 24 hours, and then I was able to check it out. So you guys got a great process was my whole point on that. And then I also just wanted to call out the rainwater did not want to practice social distancing because I thought that was funny. So great reports, everybody.
Any other comments on the reports? Okay, Lauren, anything else? Okay, let's turn to the consent agenda. Before I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, are there any items any trustee would like left out of the consent agenda vote at this time? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve consent agenda items A1A through A1J? May I have such a motion?
Mike Tennis, so move.
This is Brian.
Brian seconded. Okay, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki, yes. Tina,
Yes.
Yes. Okay, moving along to Exhibit C1. It's been determined that for discussion only, we do not need a motion to go in for just a discussion only. So I'll open up the discussion on the working budget that was presented in the packet. An overview was given by Lauren. Who would like to start off the discussion?
Mike Tennis, Richard.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
I had suggested some discussion points for possible change on both the revenue and the expenditure side of the proposed working budget. I believe all the trustees received the details of those suggestions. On the revenue side, the primary change that's being suggested is in the lowering the budgeted interest in dividend income. Since COVID hit, basically the Fed has got interest rates at a floor of 0, and we touched on it, I think, at the last meeting. Brian was pointing out that there was the rates of return were definitely dropping. So I made assumptions on what rate of returns would be. They may be a little optimistic, actually, but it does suggest a reduction of 52,000 from 129,000 down to 77,000. As I understand it, Lauren initially put it together before the whole financial market started collapsing. And so I think it would be prudent for us to adjust the revenue stream for a lower interest in dividend expectation. And then the other 38,000 in revenue reductions comes from a mix of per capita grant, PPRT, and print copy revenue and taxes. And the details are spelled out there. Probably the largest piece of that is the per capita grant. And it's something that it would not be a surprise at all for that to get tweaked. We may be awarded the grant money as we've seen in the past, but whether the funds are there appropriated and actually issued is going to be another thing, because the state is in extremely serious financial condition. And so they're going to be looking for sources of revenue under every nook and cranny. So to be conservative, I suggest we adjust the per capita grant number along with those other areas I suggested. On the expenditure side, corresponding reduction of 90,000 in expenditures, primarily in the areas of the salaries. We've had discussions in January, and we had discussions at the last meeting about changing the salary schedule, but conditions have changed dramatically, and I think we could be highly criticized to continue to perpetuate salary increases as originally discussed of 3%. I suggest the merit pool be reduced to 2.3%, which is the PTEL cap for our next tax levy session. Our last PTEL cap was at 1.9%. They're always computed on a year lag, so it's set based on December numbers. So the 2.3% was set at the end of December of 2019, so the 2.3% would reduce the salary budget need somewhat. I left the floor raising the minimum wage for compliance purposes. The 0.3% is still in there, so it's just the ongoing. There's no problem keeping the salary structure as was approved at the last meeting, but the actual budget, working budget, at a minimum, I would say, or at a maximum, I would say, should be no more than 2.3%, justified to be in line with the taxpayers' salary cap or tax cap, I should say. And then the other areas are employee insurance. I took the 10 months of employees insurance, annualized it, and then bumped it up 5%. And as opposed to the number that was in the working budget, the first draft was at almost 19%. So there's some additional substantial savings there. And yet we certainly should be adequately covered unless, Lauren, you know some major property and casualty change that I'm not aware of in the marketplace. Beyond that, it's a mix of $10,000 reductions in library materials, in operations and general programming. And there's some notes as to why I suggest those areas be discussed, because COVID is having an impact, and obviously in areas like general programming is going to be impacted in the near term. That's all I have, unless someone has questions.
I guess one of my questions would be more for Lauren. On the per capita grant, is that strictly a state program, or isn't that part of the federal program that LST, the one for science and libraries that originates in the feds and gets filtered through the state librarian? Is that part of the per capita grant, or is it strictly a state program?
I don't know. I thought it was a state program, but I can't say that based on any real knowledge. It was just an impression I had. So it may be LSTA.
Yeah, because that program is distributed to the states, and then the state librarian disperses the funds throughout the state. And I always thought that was at least part of the per capita grant program.
That may be. I mean, as another director was pointing out, it's always fully funded in an election year. We had it, that 86,000 is our full amount, and we've gotten that most of the time, but there were a couple years that we got 53,000. So it was basically $1.25 is the law, $1.25 per capita.
Yeah.
And then they took it down to, well, at 56, I guess it was 75 cents. So.
Yeah. Mike, do you have any idea? Is that strictly a state program?
My understanding is it's a state program. Funds are appropriated to the Secretary of State, and then the Secretary of State sets the amount on a per capita basis, depending on how much is appropriated to his organization.
Okay. Okay, because I agree. I think if it's a state program, it will undoubtedly be cut to some extent. I don't see us getting the full $1.25 this coming year. So I think your suggestion to reduce that is good. I think the printing and copy revenue, I think that's reasonable.
In copy, revenue for current fiscal year was lower than expected because it took us longer to get the comprise equipment up and running than we anticipated. It was a long time to get that equipment up and running. The same thing with the fax revenue, but once it was going, we were generating a good amount of revenue. That said, we need to have the public in the building in order to generate any of that revenue at all. So, you know.
Lauren, that is why I picked the $2,000, because the most recent month, the highest monthly revenue was just before COVID hit. So it was $1,900 and some dollars. And so I said, well, let's make it 2,000 because it's probably going to run over 2,000 when back to normal. But the likelihood of being back to normal through the summer months and possibly through the fall months is pretty slim.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Brian. I actually like Mike's suggestion. I can tell you, like, as a school district, we've done similar budgeting exercises where we are sort of scenario planning for different revenue scenarios, I guess. So I guess my suggestion would be, when we come back to discussion next time, that we do make some of the adjustments or the concessions on the revenue side. And then, but then Lauren, I think I would say I would leave it up to you guys then to figure out where the corresponding expenditure savings may come to keep us balanced for the year. Because I think given what we know right now about, you know, what the library service is going to look like, say in July, I think there's going to be lots of areas that our expenses are going to probably also run lower than in a typical year. So I think you probably have some different things that you could experiment with to balance those expenditures with revenues. But I think it makes a lot of sense to run a model where we do make some of these expenditure cuts, assuming that we won't get all the money we thought we were going to.
Yeah. And maybe by next month, we'll have a little clearer picture of what's going to happen throughout the state as far as opening or beginning to open things, and maybe a little bit more visibility. Because we're sitting from here right now, it's hard to say what's going to happen. So I think your comments are right on target, Mike. I think we should look at some of those reductions. Anyone else have any comments on the budget as presented?
I'm
pretty lengthy document.
On,
who is it?
This is Nikki.
Okay.
Agreeing with the comments on where are we able to discuss. I would like to know more on that insurance. If Mike's number was correct on a 19% increase, and where that came from on the insurance.
Mike, were you referring to health insurance?
Yes, I took the health insurance number.
Okay.
And I took the 10-month number and annualized it, and then compared it with what you showed. Your analysis compares budget to budget as opposed to projected actual. Okay. And
projecting actual based on current
10 months.
So we have several staff members that don't take the library's insurance because they might be on a spouse's plan. but come January, I don't know that they're still going to want to be on their spouse's plan. So when I create the budget, I assume that those people might be taking the library's insurance. That's one of the ways we end up running a surplus, because I don't want to have to come back to the board and say, oh, I need more money for health insurance because a person wanted to get health insurance, right? I don't put anyone on the spot and say, you know, I mean, it's a benefit they're entitled to. So for budget purposes, I include that money in there, but they might not need it.
Lauren, and that's why they have a budget and appropriation step, because that's where you can factor in the leeway is through that next step, because the working budget versus the budget and appropriation is merely a legal cushion for the unanticipated.
Anyone else? I don't hear anyone. Lauren, why don't you take those suggestions that were made and do as you do best, factor them in, and if you think some of the suggestions went a little too far, then you know, respond accordingly. But I do think the suggestions were in order, and they should be to some extent factored back in at your discretion, and we'll address it again next month.
Yeah, I was wondering about certainly about the interest and dividend income. Yeah, so.
Yeah.
And all those points. Yep.
That does bring up another question I had, primarily for Brian, I guess. Our investments, are they tied to specific return levels, or are they variable? That would put us at risk for something like this in a downturn.
I mean, Lauren, most of the stuff we have through Ellers is our CDs that are locked in at rates for whatever the terms are. It's just we're going to have stuff that's going to be expiring or maturing, and if we roll it over into new things, we'll be getting lower returns on the whatever we roll it into.
Yeah, so the risk is that the money that's maturing over the next 12, 18 months.
And we have stuff rolling off every month or two. There's some money that matures, and then what do we do at that point?
Okay.
But
so it could be a significant impact.
Ken did make a big point about trying to get us to extend out the terms of our investments. So he did put us into more 3-year stuff. So
yeah, the stuff that's rolled off the last 12 months or so, Lauren, we've been doing that, but I mean, we still have things rolling off, moving forward that we'll then have to be putting into something, and whatever we put into, the rates will be lower now than they were. Right?
We have millions in investments now, right? 3.3 in the special reserve, and for FDIC insurance, we don't. I mean, one of those banks has to be no more than 250,000. So yeah, we have a whole lot of investments with varying terms.
The only other point I would bring up on those investments is the reference point I heard in a finance committee meeting with District 300. They assumed a 90% rate reduction on their 36 million.
Yeah, we're not going to see a 90% reduction in interest and dividends. For one thing, we're going to have an additional $500,000 to invest with a $500,000 surplus. So, I mean, yes, I think there'll be a small reduction, but no question it will not be 90%. And to be honest with you, I'll run the numbers using our current investments and their current interest rates to figure out what we're going to get next year. So it's not hard.
Anything else from anyone on the budget? Okay, let's move on to item C2, essential services. It seems as though in order for us to get any real activity going in the library, we as a board have to decide what is an essential service for our organization. And we do that simply by declaring that we are going to allow modified operations in the library and taking it to a vote, and we can do that. We're authorized as a governmental group to establish those guidelines. So when we heard some discussion about the possibility and the excitement surrounding home delivery of materials. So in order to do that, we have to modify our library operations that at this point are pretty much at a standstill and take it to a vote. So it's a rather long, lengthy motion. I hate to read it and then have somebody else to repeat it. So would someone like to read the motion as it's listed? Because I do think the entire motion needs to be read into the record. Would somebody make that motion?
I can do that. Let me find it.
Otherwise, I'll read it and someone can
I
just.
have it right in front of me. Mike Tennis.
Okay.
Mike Tennis moves to designate modified library operations as essential services, including but not limited to delivery of library materials, return of materials via the outside book drop at the Dundee Library, and expanded internal support operations beginning May 20th, 2020.
Thank you. May I have a second, please?
Nikki Coolman, second.
Second. Okay, discussion. You heard in the director's report that folks are excited about this possibility of delivery of actual books rather than just electronics that we've dealt with since the library closed. And this is limited to deliveries and drop-offs at the Dundee Library. So the outlying ones, book drops will still be locked, shut off. Is that correct, Lauren?
Correct,
Okay.
because at Dundee, we can just go out there with a plastic container and put the materials in and close up the plastic container. We don't have to put materials in the van that we might be worried about, might be carrying the virus. This way they can just go in the container, go in the meeting room, stay in quarantine for a week, and then they're golden.
Is that the number that they came up with? I did the trustee forum last week, and I thought they said they were doing a study and they hadn't necessarily come up, and I've heard multiple, 3, and then I've heard 9, and then I've heard.
The Institute, the IMLS, Institute for Museum and Library Science, is doing a very detailed study of how long the virus lives on plastic, like plastic book covers and paper and DVDs and whatnot. And there has been a lot of conflicting information. First, the CDC was saying 1 day was all you needed, and then they were saying 3 days. And now, we operate under, a lot of guidance from Rails. And last week, Rails came out and said 7 days is a good, safe number. But we don't have fines and fees, so we don't feel any pressure to take items off people's accounts. It's not costing anybody anything to have something hanging on their account for a week after it goes in the book drop. We're going to put it in quarantine, and then a week later, then we'll run it through the sorter. So there's no cause a complication for anyone, and it's just the safest thing to do. And we can do it.
Has anything been, oh, sorry, Nick.
Time longer than what they're or right about what they're recommending, and so we're erring on the side of caution as opposed.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Chris Evans. At the just before we started the meeting tonight, they were saying on the ABC World News that ultraviolet lights are really able to negate the virus. Was that any part of the discussion?
I have heard about some success with ultraviolet lights. There's, you can buy a machine now where you can put your books into it, and UV light will even get to all the pages. And it does 6 books at a time for, only a few $1,000s. We can buy this piece of equipment that'll, but a week will kill the virus too, right? So
Sure. I just wondered.
yeah, yeah. I'm if as a long-term solution, I'd be willing to invest in some equipment, but we got time, right? We got a week. We can do a week. So,
Any other discussion?
For this, I think it's wonderful, and I'm really glad to hear the numbers that Carrie talked about at the beginning of how many hold requests there have already been and how many delivery requests there have already been, so that our community is excited about it. In fact, people outside of our community are excited about it. So, you know, that's great. Sounds like taking off.
And Lauren, we have the personal protective equipment and everything on hand, and folks know how to use it and all that stuff.
Yes,
Okay.
We've received training in how to put masks and gloves on. But you know, there's videos on that now too. So, yep, we've completed all the 5 requirements.
I just wanted to add that, it's Chris Evans again. I just wanted to add that because I had said that I was running for the board at the previous election, people knew who I was on Facebook. And when Gail Borden opened, several people were like, how come we're not open yet? When are we going to be open? And are we going to have delivery? And are we going to? So I got a lot of confirmation on how excited people are. I think I had like 7 people contact me. These are not people that are my friends. These just knew I was running. So I was excited about that.
Did you tell them we don't have a drive-up window?
Pardon me?
Did you tell them we don't have a drive-up window?
I did. And I also said that I did tell them from your report that you were still waiting on the PPE and everything. But as soon as we had it, we're going to, you know, try to make things up and running. And I got a lot of comment from those 7 people. I got thank yous. One person was nasty and wanted to know why Gail Borden was before us, but so what? You know, you can't please everybody.
I'm not sure they're doing delivery yet. I thought they just
they aren't. They're just doing
opened their drive-up window, which if I had a drive-up window, I'd have opened it already too.
Exactly.
Mike, did you have a comment?
This is Brian. I was trying a minute ago. So, I mean, Lauren, you know how much I'm in favor of this, and my family will be some of the first deliveries, I'm sure.
Yeah, how many books do you put on hold, Brian? And
yeah, I don't know, too many, but
I can let you know you're not the number one. Lindholm family, right? There is a family with more books than, which I didn't think was possible, but yep.
Wow. Okay. What's the staffing impact though? Like, I mean, will we be having significantly more people back at work at Dundee Library to support this, or is this pretty much with the folks that are already?
Delivery can be done very skeletal because we are still under the shelter-in-place order. That's why we didn't want to do anything that required a whole lot of staff in the building. Until May 29th, we are still shelter-in-place. So this had to be just essential. If on May 29th we move from phase 2 to phase 3, then we can start having more staff in the building working towards curbside. And it's, I'm going to tentatively shooting for June 16th to begin curbside, because for curbside, then we can have our, well, once we move to phase 3, then we can have the technical services department coming in. We can start receiving new materials in and processing materials again, things that would be hard to justify as essential. I mean, you know, the delivery we feel like is a minimum library service that we can at least give people over in phase 2. But looking forward to phase 3 and being able to offer more in the building.
And when you said it's limited only to materials that are at Dundee, then do we have access to Randall Oaks branch at this point?
We do not have access to Randall Oaks right now. We have a key to get in the Randall Oaks library, but we don't have a key to get into the building. But the Park District is wonderful. They've always been a wonderful partner. And there've been a couple times that John has needed to get in for the tape backup, the server stuff. And they have a maintenance that Hank, the building manager there has worked with John. So it's, you know, if there's something pressing, we're able to get in there, but we don't have access to just get in there and start dealing with library materials yet. And I'm not sure what the status is with the Park District, because the governor's orders have called out gyms a little bit more than they have libraries. So I'm not sure where they go at phase 3.
Okay, and then last question is, do we have any idea when like the sort of interlibrary loan tech stuff would be fired back up to allow, I mean, are other libraries looking at either doing curbside or delivery, and then, you know, the idea that books would be moving between libraries? Do you see any evidence that that's on the horizon as well?
Many libraries are looking at curbside, almost all of them in June. Gail Borden was the first library to do anything with their May 1st delivery drive-up window. There are several that plan to start curbside in mid-June, like us. CCS is planning for when we can start processing materials between locations, but we're stuck with when Rails is going to do delivery, right? Until, I mean, even if we can start pulling stuff for other libraries, until Rails is willing to get in their van and drive around from library to library, we can't do anything. And I haven't heard anything from Rails yet about when they plan to start that.
Anything else?
Just a question about how much driving is involved. I mean, is someone driving around for 8 hours a day?
That's the plan. Again, the staff are dying to get back to work. So we're going to use Ruben to drive the library van. He's an account services clerk, full-time account services clerk, who's, you know, very, very, very eager for this opportunity. If you've ever come in and seen Ruben at the greeter desk, you were met with a huge smile and a huge welcome. And he is the perfect person to be first out of the gate with getting stuff for people. My biggest concern with Ruben is we cannot accept materials back because Ruben can't, we're not getting into him handling materials that may, you know, this is all contactless delivery. And Ruben is such a nice guy. He's going to feel terrible having to say no to people. So I told him, just make me the bad guy. That, you know, the library director will not permit me to pick up library materials at this point. So he's gonna have a hard time with that. But.
And I think maybe when you do the reminder call, because aren't you going to call that day to tell them when it's going to be delivered, or it wasn't? Didn't I read that in the director? Maybe they can remind them that as much as we'd like to, we can't take anything back. Please don't put anything to the driver.
He's going to call John Sabala, our IT manager, is so good. Ruben will use his cell phone to call the patron and say, the materials were just left at your house. And Ruben's cell phone will get masked. So it looks like that call is coming from the library, even though it's his cell. So I think we're sending out an email saying materials are coming that day. And there will be a reminder in that email saying we can't take any materials right now. And I think Kirsten composed, you know, how to word it. It's if you are welcome to hold on to them. If you really have to get rid of them, you can come by the Dundee Library and drop them in the outside book drop. So, and so far that message went out 9 days ago, and we've gotten a handful of items back. So far people seem happy just to hang on to the items, which is good.
Yeah, mine's sitting over on my bookshelf right over there.
Yeah, there's no hurry.
In case I come back to you and I'm like, I don't remember where I put those books. I'm telling all of you right now, they're on my bookshelf. Sorry.
We got it.
This is okay.
Anything else? Nikki, could we have a roll call, please?
Dave.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Nikki. Christina.
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Okay, going to item C3, employment status of part-time shelvers, clerks, maintenance, and assistants. As you'll remember, we had a rather lengthy discussion last month on the two options that essentially we had then, and we have the same two options facing us tonight. I think it's since the board adopted option number 1 last month, which was to continue to pay the employees, all employees, through our meeting tonight. I think that would be the one we should start with as far as a motion. So may I have a motion to approve option 1, which is to continue to employ and pay all part-time shelvers, clerks, maintenance, and assistants through June 16th of 2020, which is our next meeting. May I have such a motion?
I so move that we
Chris?
continue to pay them.
Second?
Second.
And Christina is the second. Discussion. Who wants to start the discussion? We went through the pros and cons of both options last month, and the will of the board was that we continue with option 1 until tonight.
I had a question, Lauren. This is Nikki. So you're talking about phase 3 with, hope in our hearts, with curbside starting June 16th. How does that, or tentatively June 16th, how does that affect the part-time people? And also, for the summer lunches, can part-time be utilized for?
Yep, that's what I wondered.
Curbside delivery.
Yep.
The 28 staff remaining would be able to handle everything with curbside and with summer lunches. While we have used volunteers in the past, we're not going to use them now because we're trying to maintain social distancing. Summer lunches were much more labor intensive in the past because we were managing a room full of kids. And this is curbside. The task force is developing. We're spending a lot of time on parking lots because we're narrow. We want to have a one-way in and a one-way out. And so that way people can queue up to get their stuff delivered in their car on the east side of the building. However, lunches will be on the back door, the west side of the building. So we would have curbside delivery on the east side of the building until noon. And then from noon to 1 on the west side, you can get your summer breakfasts and lunches. So the same staff would be in the building for both of those, whether they're, we're all going to be taking some time as a runner, but.
So curbside is going to be, I understand lunch limiting an hour, but curbside pickup is only going to be an hour? Is that what you said?
No, curbside, we can do not, we're open 9 to 9. We would do 9 to noon curbside on the east side for materials.
And then 1 to.
Right, noon to 1, no materials because we want all the traffic flow to.
I understand. All right, thank you.
And then at 1 o'clock, we pick up again on curbside on the east side.
So Lauren, this is Brian, I had a similar question, I guess, then of with the governor's 5-phase plan, at what point would we have operations up and running to where we would have work for these part-time employees to come back and do them?
Well, if we move phase 3, we can theoretically open the building again, but we have to maintain the 6 feet of social distancing. And looking at both buildings, that's difficult. We have a lot of staff in a small space. So we're looking at the plastic shields, and plastic shield will be pretty easy if you think about the Dundee circulation desk, because there's those high walls. But the Dundee Adult and Teen Services desk is just a big open in the middle of everything. So those spaces are much harder to devise how we would do social distancing there. Like anyone that's behind the desk, I mean, even with the plastic shield, it's complicated. It's very complicated. So I don't know when we would be looking at folks back in the building, once we get the curbside going, then we'll, you know, we'll be trying to put those plans in place. Yeah.
I know it's probably an impossible question, but I was just trying to like anticipate when we'd be in a position such that we'd be calling those people back because we'd actually need them to support whatever the daily operation of the libraries would look like at that point. And it feels like it's probably sometime in phase 4 at least, but I just wanted to confirm with you. So
Yeah, in my head, I'm kind of like, once we get to curbside, we could do curbside and delivery for 60 days. And I feel like we could be providing some pretty good service at that time. We should be able to get people the stuff that they want. We're still not able to do programs, which is, we're still not able to do physical programs in the library, but we're able to provide a lot. And if you saw the virtual programming statistics, holy smokes, we actually saw more virtual programs last month than we did in physical programs the month before. So we are able to reach an enormous number of people virtually, and we'll continue to do so there. So, but yeah.
I completely agree, and I buy that. I'm more just trying to think as we're talking about this motion here. So much of it, I think, hinges on like, yeah, is it 60 days till we would have work for these folks to come back and do, or is it 6 or 8 months? You know, and I know it's an impossible question, but I think those are the things that, at least in my mind, we have to be at least, you know.
I have a hard time imagining all those people back in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was expecting you to say, but I wanted to make sure that I was correct in that assumption. Okay.
That's why I was trying to hope that they could be utilized for the summer lunches or the.
Me too.
Does not.
So anyone else have any comments?
Lauren, this is Dave. Question regarding other libraries. I know last month you reported that there was just one library, I think it was Mount Prospect, that was furloughing their part-timers. Are you still talking to other libraries?
Yes, and by June 1st, there are very few libraries that are going to continue to pay emergency closing pay to their staff. Very few.
So that's kind of the opposite of last month when we asked the question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What is the unemployment impact?
I'm sorry, you faded out.
What's the impact? What's the cost to us for unemployment?
So that's a big question. So we're a reimbursable employer, and we are part of an insurance pool for unemployment insurance, like we are for our health insurance and our liability and other insurance. So I talked to our unemployment insurance pool. What we pay in unemployment will actually go down in this calendar year if we furlough staff, because the amount we pay on a calendar year basis is based on our current payroll. So if our payroll costs go down, then our unemployment goes down for 2020. Then in 2021, the rate that we pay into the pool will go up based on the amount that we have to pay in reimbursement. So we're a reimbursable employer. So, and the amount that IDES pays out to staff is dependent on, a number of factors: how long they worked here, making sure that they, that they qualify. The maximum amount that a staff member can get from the state is 47% of what they earned. But then, of course, there is the federal stimulus as well that gets tacked on, which, we've, again, as you can see from my monthly report, we've had a lot of education in all of this. So as the unemployment consultant said, if you qualify for $1 of state unemployment, then you also get the federal stimulus. So there are some, the federal government is providing much needed help for people that qualify. So as a for instance with us, in our reimbursable portion, the most we would pay would be 47% of what we're currently paying. And then because we're in this pool, it's smoothed over the course of 3 years. So if for instance, someone was earning $100 a week now and they qualified for the maximum, and then we would be responsible for reimbursing the state of Illinois $47 of that, and that $47 would be spread over calendar year 2021, calendar year 2022, and calendar year 2023. It is a big question, but yeah.
Isn't it, well, let me start over. How many of our employees that are part-time will in fact qualify for unemployment? Because you have to make a certain amount to get unemployment, right?
You do have to make a certain amount, but in Illinois, that bar is set fairly low, and COVID-19 has provided additional incentives.
Okay.
Part-time and full-time doesn't matter when it comes to unemployment.
Okay.
Anyone else?
It hurts me to have 32. It was 34 last time. What happened to the other two?
We have one staff member who resigned. She's moving out of state. And we had one staff member who is part-time but has some essential skills. As a matter of fact, she's the only person with these essential skills. So we actually took her off of from that list. She's one of the that are literally in the building right now working. So.
Because the amount of impact actually dropped also from 10,000 to 8,000 per week. Am I correct on that?
It was 8,500 in salaries last time, and it nets down to 8,000 in salaries because the two people that aren't there. Okay. We rounded up to about 10 when you took into account FICA and IMRF. So that's where you weren't dreaming about that number. We had thrown around the number 10, but what was in motion was 8,500. That's specific to salaries, and it's now 8,000 specific to salaries.
And that was per week or
per week. Mm-hmm.
If you remember from last month, I mentioned that we have been advised by our attorneys that we really cannot make the decision based on the federal relief program for unemployed people, because the only ones that can decide that is the Illinois Department of Employment Security. And so our decision can't be made, oh, well, they're going to get this and they're going to get that, because we don't hold those purse strings. And so please don't let that be the guiding factor in this. Does anyone else have any comments? You know, we've extended this thing for an entire month, hoping that we would see something at the other end. But here we are a month later, and as we've heard the discussion, there just isn't any clear view going forward for quite some time. So the issue is, do we keep them on? The motion on the table is for option one, which is to continue to employ those part-time shelvers, clerks, maintenance, assistants through the period going to next month's meeting. If there's no other discussion, I'd like to call for a vote on the motion that we have on the table.
On option
one.
Brian, oh, no one has any comments?
Yeah,
Okay.
Oh.
Dave,
No.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
No.
Brian,
No.
Nikki is no. Christina,
Yes.
Instead of 2 bucks, 1 buck.
Richard.
can I just get, what's the vote count at this point?
It is 4 nays and 2 ayes.
Yeah, I couldn't hear all the thing. I vote no.
Count who did what?
I vote no.
Okay. You vote no? Okay, so that was 5 nays and 2 ayes.
So option 1 is defeated. So I'd like a motion to approve option 2, which is to adopt resolution 2005 authorizing furlough of the 32 part-time shelters, clerks, maintenance, and assistants effective May 20th. I have such a motion.
This is Brian, so moved.
Second, please.
Second.
That
Who
was
is that?
Dave. That's Dave.
Okay, second. Well, it's not an easy thing. It's not something any of us want to do, but there just isn't any path forward at this point. Hopefully things will turn around and we can get those folks back as soon as possible. Any comments on this motion before we take a vote?
Mike Tennis here.
Mike, go ahead.
Under option 2, there's a reference to enough staff hours available using remaining staff. What are we talking about in terms of remaining staff approximately? Like how many staff would we have after a furlough of the part-timers?
I believe I think Lauren said 28.
It's 26. I think of us as roughly 60, but we're 58 right now. 26 full-timers.
Okay. I don't mean to be an ogre, but the question has to be raised in terms of staffing levels, given the amount of time before we restore to normal conditions. Lauren, I think you have like 7 direct reports, remember rightly? And I think Heather has 5 direct reports. There's a dozen out of the 26, let's say. Are there some full-timers that are non-essential that we need to consider as part of the furlough action?
We did have that conversation in thinking about move from phase 2 to phase 3, and assuming I've been operating based on the way the April meeting went, I'm not surprised that the option 1 vote went the way it did tonight. So in planning for workload in the next, in June and in July and in August, these remaining 26 are all going to be at full work. That is between the virtual programs, between the getting materials ordered, getting materials received, getting materials processed, getting materials out the door to people, getting them either delivered to their door or running materials out to people's cars. And it's my intent. There are a lot of libraries that are like, okay, we're doing curbside service from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday. I don't understand that. The point is keeping staff safe because we're keeping social distance. Fine, but I don't understand why we couldn't do that 9 to 9. That's our hours. If we're allowed to, be open. We're going to be open 9 to 9. So I need 26 people in order to be able to have people running out to people's cars, all the hours that we're usually open. So I understand where you're coming from, and I have had conversations with existing full-time staff about their comfort levels with beginning this process, because frankly there were some staff that I thought might prefer not to work. Right? I mean, this is a scary time. It's a scary time for everyone, but everyone wants to work. So so the 26 people that are still in question are eager to get back to providing service.
And Lauren, the service will be provided 7 days a week?
That's the intention, all the hours that we're usually open.
Thank you.
In addition, in part of our discussion last time dealt with those others that were not included have duties to perform away from the library, work at home types of things, meaningful work that they're doing for the library.
Yep.
And that will only be enhanced by a partial reopening where some of these folks can actually come in and do some physical stuff. But those that are not will still be working on the virtual programs. We'll still be working on all the other things that they've been doing during the month of April. Am I correct in that, Lauren?
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So I think
selecting
the numbers right.
materials, right? We found things that we never had a work from home policy before because we are a place. We are a third space. So I didn't want people selecting materials from home. I wanted people here to be able to support patrons. But if we can't come in the building, then there are a lot of things that can be done from home. So we'll probably be in some kind of a manager's or it shifts. That some days they're working from home and some days they're working in the library while we limit the total number of people in the building in this interim phase.
Thank you, Lauren. I have one more question related to the remaining staff. Really, it's an empathic thought in relative to the part-timers, in that potentially we're looking at a pay increase effective with the start of the new fiscal year. And I think we should also be discussing a wage freeze until the library is restored to normal operating conditions. Thoughts?
Well, last month, the will of the board was that we would not entertain a wage freeze. So unless that's changed, I don't know where that one goes, Mike. Because we did have a specific vote on that.
All right.
Does anyone disagree with that?
That was my recollection.
Doesn't mean it can't be revisited, but as it stands now, that was and remains the will of the board.
And there's just one thing I want to point out. So while we're looking at board action on the decision to furlough, the resolution is written specifically that the library director has the discretion of calling staff back. So if we have, if virtual programs are so crazy busy that we need to call back, a virtual programmer, that kind of thing, that could happen, right? This isn't, I don't need to come back to you as things begin to ramp up, that we're ready to have instead of being 26, maybe it's time to be 28, maybe it's time to be 30 kind of a thing.
No, I think that's, according to the resolution, I think that's within your purvey to call back as you see fit. Does anyone disagree with that? Okay, is there any other discussion on this matter before we go to vote? Anyone? Hearing nothing, Nikki, could we have a roll call vote, please?
You're gonna have to help me out. Which is,
This is option 2 to furlough. So yes to furlough or no.
yeah, yes. Yes.
Chris,
No.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki, yes.
No.
Richard,
Yes. What's the vote count, Nikki?
5 yes, 2 no. Motion carried.
Motion carries. Who would ever thought we would be taking votes like that? Unbelievable. Certainly nothing any of us wanted. That concludes the business part of our meeting for the public business. I would like to ask for a motion to go into executive session. So it's going to be quite a list. Per ILCS 120/2, paragraph C, section 21, discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under this act, whether for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes or the semi-annual minutes review of the minutes mandated by section 2.06 of the act. Also, ILCS 120/2, paragraph C, section 5, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, including meetings held for the purpose of discussing whether a particular parcel should be acquired. And lastly, per ILCS 120/2, paragraph C, section 1, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of a public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. May I have such motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Okay. Since all votes have to be roll call and virtual, Nikki, could we have a roll call, please?
Dave,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Nikki, yes. Christine,
Yes.
Richard.
Yes. Okay, we are now adjourned at 9 o'clock. Does anyone need a break before we go into executive session for 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. At 9:05, we'll come back.
Thanks.